The summer of 1889 brought the hottest season anyone in the western frontier could remember. Endless sand stretched beyond the horizon while powerful desert winds erased every trail within minutes. Travelers avoided crossing the Red Canyon desert because many who entered never returned. The burning sun showed no mercy, and the silence of the desert often hid danger behind every hill. Ryan Brooks lived alone in a small wooden cabin beside the edge of the desert. He owned a strong chestnut horse named Blaze, an old revolver, a hunting knife, and little else. Every morning he carried supplies between distant western towns, earning just enough to survive. Although quiet and reserved, Ryan had built a reputation for helping strangers without expecting anything in return. One afternoon, the clear blue sky suddenly turned orange. A violent sandstorm swept across the desert with terrifying speed. Ryan quickly covered his face with a cloth and guided Blaze toward a group of large rocks, hoping to find shelter. As the storm howled around him, he noticed something unusual. A frightened white horse raced through the blowing sand without a rider. Ryan immediately followed the animal. Several minutes later, he discovered a young woman lying unconscious beside a broken wagon almost completely buried beneath the sand. She wore a dusty light blue traveling dress with a long brown coat. Her face was covered with sand, but even through the storm he could see she was beautiful. Without wasting a second, Ryan wrapped her inside his blanket, lifted her carefully onto Blaze, and rode toward an abandoned traveler's cabin hidden among the rocky cliffs. Hours passed before the storm finally ended. The young woman slowly opened her eyes as warm firelight filled the small cabin. She looked around in confusion before noticing Ryan quietly preparing fresh water beside the fireplace. "You saved my life." Ryan smiled gently. "Anyone would have done the same." She slowly shook her head. Most people would have searched my wagon first." Ryan looked toward the broken leather satchel resting beside the door. "I never touched your belongings." The young woman seemed surprised. For the first time, she smiled. "My name is Ava. Thank you, Ryan." Before either of them could speak again, distant gunshots echoed across the desert. Ryan stepped outside. Far across the dunes, 6 armed riders were following the tracks leading directly toward the cabin. The evening sun slowly disappeared behind the endless desert dunes as Ryan watched 6 armed riders moving steadily toward the abandoned cabin. Their horses kicked up clouds of sand while the men carefully followed every track left behind after the storm. Ryan quietly stepped back inside and closed the wooden door. Ava noticed the serious look on his face. "Someone found us." Ryan nodded. 6 riders. They are following your trail." Ava looked toward the leather satchel resting beside the fireplace. Her smile disappeared instantly. "They cannot have it." Ryan picked up his revolver. "What is inside?" Ava hesitated for a moment. "Nothing worth dying for." Ryan looked into her eyes. "If men are chasing you across the desert, it must be worth something." Before she could answer, loud voices echoed outside. One rider shouted, "Open the door. We only want the girl." Ryan calmly moved a heavy table against the entrance. "You should leave." Ava shook her head. "If they find me, they will kill you too." The horses stopped only a few steps from the cabin. The leader slowly pushed the door, but it refused to move. Ryan spoke through the wooden wall. "This cabin is occupied. Keep riding." The man laughed. "We are not leaving without the girl." Silence filled the cabin for several seconds. Then a gunshot shattered one of the windows. Wood splinters flew across the room. Ryan immediately pulled Ava behind the stone fireplace. Another bullet struck the door. The riders were no longer waiting. Ryan whispered, "There is another way out." Behind the fireplace, an old wooden hatch led into a narrow tunnel once used by travelers escaping desert bandit. Ryan opened the hatch and handed Ava the leather satchel. "Stay close to me." The tunnel was dark and narrow, but after several minutes, it opened behind a rocky canyon, far away from the cabin. The night sky was now filled with bright stars. Ryan and Ava climbed onto Blaze and quietly rode deeper into the desert. Neither of them noticed that one rider had secretly followed them from the cliffs above. The stranger smiled beneath his black hat. This time, they will lead us exactly where we need to go. The cold desert night stretched endlessly beneath a sky filled with bright stars. Ryan guided Blaze through the narrow canyons while Ava remained silent behind him. The only sounds were the steady hoofbeats and the gentle desert wind. Neither of them realized a lone rider was quietly following from the distant cliffs, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Just before sunrise, they reached a small oasis surrounded by tall palm trees. Crystal clear water reflected the first golden rays of morning. Ryan allowed Blaze to drink while Ava sat beside the water, holding the old leather satchel tightly. Ryan finally spoke. "Those men are not chasing you for nothing. Tell me the truth." Ava looked at the satchel for several long moments before opening it. Inside were only a faded leather map, a small brass compass, and an old silver key. Ryan frowned. "That is all." Ava nodded. "Many people believe this map leads to the lost Silver Canyon, a place filled with gold, silver, and precious stones. Treasure hunters have searched for it for nearly 50 years. Ryan examined the map carefully. The paper was old but beautifully drawn. It showed mountains, rivers, abandoned trails, and strange symbols unlike anything he had ever seen. "Do you believe the treasure is real?" Ava quietly smiled. "I do not care about treasure. I only promised someone that I would deliver this map safely." Before Ryan could ask another question, the brass compass suddenly began spinning wildly. Both of them looked at it in surprise. The needle finally stopped, pointing toward a distant line of red mountains, far beyond the desert. At the same moment, the ground beneath them shook slightly. A loud explosion echoed across the valley. They quickly climbed the nearest sand dune. Far away, thick black smoke rose into the sky. A steam train had stopped on the tracks. Several masked outlaws surrounded it, while frightened passengers ran for cover. Ryan immediately climbed onto Blaze. "Those riders are robbing the train." Ava looked at him. "We should leave before they see us." Ryan tightened his grip on the reins. "There are innocent people down there." Without another word, he raced toward the burning train, unaware that the outlaw leader was the very same man who had been hunting Ava since the beginning. The morning sun climbed above the red mountains as Ryan urged Blaze toward the stopped steam train. Thick black smoke drifted into the sky, while terrified passengers ran across the desert trying to escape the masked outlaws. Gunshots echoed through the valley, and frightened horses pulled loose wagons across the sand. Ava rode close behind him. "Ryan, there are too many of them." Ryan never slowed. "If we do nothing, innocent people will die." They reached a rocky hill overlooking the railway. Nearly 20 masked outlaws surrounded the train. One group forced frightened passengers onto the ground, while another carried heavy wooden crates from the cargo cars. Their leader stood beside the engine wearing a long black coat and a wide black hat. His face remained hidden beneath a dark bandana. Ryan quietly observed the scene. They are not stealing money. They are looking for something specific. Ava suddenly became pale. The cargo train. It was carrying old government records across the frontier. The leader must be searching for the map. Ryan looked at her. "Then we stop them here." He guided Blaze behind a line of large boulders. From there, they could reach the rear of the train without being seen. Ryan quietly entered the last cargo car while Ava stayed outside watching the outlaws. Inside, he found frightened railway workers hiding behind wooden boxers. One elderly engineer whispered, "They planted explosives beneath the bridge ahead. If the train moves, everyone will die." Ryan immediately understood the danger. He climbed beneath the train and found several sticks of dynamite connected to a burning fuse. Only seconds remained. Using his hunting knife, he carefully cut the fuse. The flame stopped only a few inches from the explosives. At that exact moment, a loud shout echoed across the railway yard. The outlaw leader had spotted him. "There he is. Catch him alive." Gunfire erupted from every direction. Ryan jumped from beneath the train and ran blaze while bullets struck the railway tracks around him. Ava rode forward without hesitation, reaching out her hand. Ryan grabbed it and leaped onto the horse behind her. Together they galloped away across the open desert. The outlaw leader watched them disappear into the distance. Then he slowly smiled. Good, now they are riding exactly where I wanted them to go. The desert wind carried clouds of dust behind Blaze as Ryan and Ava rode away from the burning railway. The sound of gunfire slowly faded until only the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves remained. The sun stood high above the canyon, making every mile hotter than the last. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Finally, Ava looked back toward the distant smoke. Those people are safe because of you. Ryan smiled slightly. I only did what anyone should do. Ava quietly laughed. Most people would have kept riding. By late afternoon, they reached an abandoned western town, hidden between red cliffs. The empty streets were lined with broken wooden buildings. Rusted signs swung gently in the wind, while old wagons stood where they had been left many years before. Ryan stopped Blaze. We can rest here until sunset. Ava looked around carefully. This place feels strange. Ryan nodded. People call it Ghost Town. No one has lived here for almost 20 years. They entered the old hotel where dust covered every table and broken windows allowed warm sunlight to shine across the wooden floor. Ryan found fresh footprints. Someone has been here recently. Before either of them could investigate further, they heard soft footsteps upstairs. Ryan quietly drew his revolver. Ava picked up an old lantern. They slowly climbed the wooden staircase. At the end of the hallway, one room stood slightly open. Ryan pushed the door. Inside sat an old man with a long white beard, calmly drinking coffee beside the window. He looked at Ryan and smiled. I wondered how long it would take for you to find me. Ryan frowned. Do I know you? The old man slowly shook his head. But I know why those men are chasing the girl. His eyes moved toward Ava. And I know what the map really leads to. Ava stepped forward. You have seen this map before. The old man nodded. Many years ago, because I was the one who drew it. Before anyone could ask another question, a loud explosion shook the entire town. The front entrance of the hotel collapsed into the street. Masked riders surrounded every building. The outlaw leader looked toward the broken hotel window and smiled. Now, there is nowhere left to run. The explosion shook the old hotel as dust and broken wood crashed onto the floor. Ryan immediately pulled Ava away from the shattered window while the old mapmaker calmly picked up his worn leather hat. Outside, dozens of masked riders surrounded every street of the abandoned town. Their leader slowly dismounted from his horse and looked toward the hotel with a confident smile. Ryan glanced through a crack in the wall. They have surrounded the entire town. Ava tightened her grip on the leather satchel. If they capture the map, everything is over. The old man quietly stood. Follow me. Ryan looked at him with surprise. You know another way out? The old man smiled. I built one many years ago. He moved an old bookshelf aside, revealing a narrow staircase leading beneath the hotel. The three hurried into the darkness just as bullets shattered the upstairs windows. The underground tunnel stretched beneath the deserted streets. Supported by old wooden beams, it led toward an abandoned silver mine outside the town. As they walked, the old man finally spoke. My name is Samuel Reed. 50 years ago, I explored every canyon in this desert. The map does not lead to treasure. It leads to something far more valuable. Ryan frowned. Then why are so many men willing to kill for it? Samuel stopped beside a heavy iron door. Because they believe the silver hidden there can buy an empire. He unlocked the door with a rusted key. Inside were shelves filled with journals, maps, and surveying tools. On the wall hung a large drawing of the lost Silver Canyon. Samuel pointed toward the center of the map. There is only one safe path through the canyon. Without this map, no one returns alive. Before Ryan could reply, the sound of footsteps echoed through the tunnel. The outlaws had discovered the secret passage. Samuel quickly handed the leather map back to Ava. Take it. Do not stop. until you reach Eagle Rock, Ryan asked. What about you? Samuel smiled sadly. Someone must stay behind to slow them down. He pulled a heavy iron leg. The tunnel began to collapse behind them. Ryan and Ava ran toward the mine exit while rocks crashed into the passage. Outside, they climbed onto Blaze and galloped toward the distant mountains. Far behind them, the tunnel disappeared beneath tons of stone. For the moment, they had escaped. But the outlaw leader was already taking another route, and this time he knew exactly where they were going. The first stars appeared above the western mountains. As Ryan and Ava rode away from the abandoned silver mine, Blaze was exhausted after crossing miles of rough desert trails, so Ryan guided him toward a quiet valley where a clear stream flowed between tall cottonwood trees. After days of danger, the peaceful place felt almost unreal. Ryan gathered dry branches and lit a small campfire while Ava filled 2 cups with fresh water from the stream. The warm glow of the flames pushed back the darkness and, for the first time since they had met, neither of them heard gunshots or galloping horses. Ava sat quietly beside the fire. I never imagined someone would risk so much for a stranger. Ryan looked at the dancing flames. When I found you in the desert, you were alone. I could not leave you there. She smiled softly. Then I am glad the storm found you before anyone else. For several peaceful moments, they watched the fire in silence. Ryan removed a small metal cup from his saddlebag and poured fresh coffee. Ava laughed. You even carry coffee into the desert. Ryan shrugged with a smile. Some things are too important to leave behind. Both of them laughed together. It was the first real laughter they had shared since their journey began. As the fire slowly burned lower, Ava opened the leather satchel once again. She carefully unfolded the old map. Ryan noticed a tiny mark near the bottom corner that neither of them had seen before. It looked like the shape of an eagle. Ava gently traced the symbol with her finger. Samuel told us to reach Eagle Rock. Maybe this is the place he meant. Ryan nodded. Then we leave at sunrise. A sudden shooting star crossed the night sky. Ava closed her eyes and quietly made a wish. Ryan looked at her. What did you wish for? She smiled without answering. Some wishes only come true if they remain secret. Just then, Blaze lifted his head and gave a nervous snort. Ryan instantly reached for his revolver. Something was moving beyond the trees. A shadow slowly stepped into the firelight. It was not one of the outlaws. The stranger wore a dusty sheriff badge and raised both hands peacefully. Then he looked directly at Ryan. I have been searching for both of you for 3 days. You are walking straight into a trap. The campfire flickered beneath the quiet night sky as Ryan slowly stood with his revolver pointed toward the stranger. Blaze remained restless while Ava stepped behind Ryan holding the leather satchel tightly. The man stopped a few steps from the fire and carefully removed his dusty hat. My name is Sheriff Daniel Hayes. I am not your enemy. Ryan did not lower his weapon. Then tell me why you have been following us. The sheriff reached into his coat very slowly and removed his silver badge together with an official document. Several towns have been attacked during the past month. The same outlaw gang has robbed trains, destroyed supply wagons, and murdered anyone searching for the lost Silver Canyon. Ava looked at him carefully. How did you find us? Daniel smiled faintly. Your trail was easier to follow than theirs. Ryan finally lowered his revolver. The sheriff sat beside the campfire and accepted a cup of coffee. For several minutes, none of them spoke. Then Daniel quietly looked toward the leather satchel. They believe that map will lead them to endless silver. Ryan nodded. Samuel told us something different. Daniel stared into the flames. Samuel was right. The canyon is real. But most people never return because they choose the wrong path. Only one trail crosses the canyon safely. Ava unfolded the old map on the ground. Daniel pointed toward the eagle symbol. Eagle Rock. When the morning sun reaches the highest cliff, a hidden trail becomes visible for only a few minutes. Miss that moment, and the canyon disappears behind shifting sand forever. Ryan looked toward the eastern horizon. Then we leave before sunrise. Daniel nodded. I will ride with you. 3 people have a better chance than 2. Suddenly, Blaze began stomping the ground again. This time, every horse became nervous. Daniel quickly stood. Someone is here. A faint whistle echoed through the darkness. Then another answered from the opposite side of the valley. Ryan climbed onto a nearby boulder and looked across the hills. Small lights appeared one after another. Torches, dozens of them. The outlaw gang had quietly surrounded the entire valley while they were sleeping. Their leader stepped onto a distant ridge and raised his rifle toward the camp. His cold voice echoed through the night. At sunrise, the map will finally be mine. The first light of dawn touched the desert as the outlaw gang slowly closed. And from every direction, their torches disappeared one by one while the rising sun revealed more than 30 armed riders surrounding the valley. Ryan stood beside Blaze with his revolver ready. Sheriff Daniel loaded his rifle while Ava carefully secured the leather satchel beneath her coat. The outlaw leader raised his hand. "Bring me the map. No one else has to die," Ryan answered calmly. "Come and take it." The valley erupted with gunfire. Bullets struck rocks and tree trunks as Ryan, Daniel, and Ava raced toward their horses. Blaze charged through the narrow canyon while the outlaws followed close behind. The chase became faster with every passing second. Dust filled the air as horses leaped over fallen trees and crossed dry riverbeds. Daniel looked toward the eastern cliffs. "Eagle Rock is less than 2 miles away. Do not stop." Ryan glanced behind. The outlaw leader was gaining ground. His black horse was faster than the others. Ava suddenly pointed toward the mountain. There, the eagle-shaped cliff. The first rays of sunlight touched the massive rock formation. For a brief moment, a narrow trail appeared between 2 towering cliffs. Exactly as Samuel had described, Ryan smiled. That must be the hidden path. The 3 riders entered the passage just as the sunlight began to fade. Behind them, the outlaws tried to follow. The narrow trail suddenly disappeared beneath falling sand. Several riders lost their way, and their horses slid down the rocky slopes. Only the outlaw leader managed to cross before the trail vanished completely. Ryan stopped his horse on the other side. "It is only him now." The outlaw leader slowly removed the black bandana covering his face. For the first time, Ryan clearly saw the man hunting them. A long scar crossed one side of his face. His eyes remained cold and fearless. He smiled while drawing 2 revolvers. "Now there are no witnesses, no place to run, and no one left to save you." The desert became silent as the morning wind swept across. Eagle Rock. Ryan slowly climbed down from Blaze, while Ava and Sheriff Daniel watched from a safe distance. The narrow hidden trail had disappeared behind them, leaving only one path through the canyon. The outlaw leader stood alone beneath the towering cliffs with 2 revolvers resting in his hands. For several moments, neither man moved. The only sound came from the wind carrying sand across the rocks. The outlaw leader smiled. "You have caused me more trouble than anyone else," Ryan calmly replied. "Then perhaps today your trouble ends." The stranger slowly removed his black hat. "My name is Victor Graves. Remember it before you die." Ryan drew his revolver. "I only remember honest men." Victor laughed. "Then you will forget me soon." The duel began. Both men fired almost at the same moment. Bullets struck the rocks, sending dust into the air. Ryan quickly moved behind a large boulder while Victor climbed onto higher ground, searching for a better angle. Sheriff Daniel fired from a distance, forcing Victor to keep moving. Ava looked across the canyon and suddenly noticed something strange. The cliffs above Victor were cracked after years of wind and rain. She shouted, "Ryan, the rocks!" Ryan immediately understood. He aimed not at Victor but at the weakened cliff above him. One powerful shot echoed through the canyon. A deep crack spread across the stone. Within seconds, enormous rocks broke loose and crashed onto the narrow trail. Victor barely escaped, but his horse became trapped beneath the falling boulders. His revolver slid across the ground out of reach. Ryan walked forward, keeping his weapon ready. "It is over." Victor slowly stood covered in dust. "You may stop me, but others will never stop searching. Ryan frowned. Searching for what? Victor smiled despite his defeat. The map was never about silver. It leads to something hidden beneath the canyon. Something worth far more than treasure. Before Ryan could ask another question, a loud rumbling echoed beneath the ground. The earth shook violently. A hidden stone doorway slowly rose from the canyon floor directly in front of them. The map had revealed its true destination. The canyon floor continued trembling as the massive stone doorway slowly rose from beneath the sand. Dust drifted through the morning air, while ancient carvings appeared across the weathered surface. Ryan, Ava, and Sheriff Daniel stared in complete silence. Even Victor Graves forgot his defeat as he looked toward the hidden entrance. The enormous door stood twice the height of a man. Its surface was covered with strange symbols, worn smooth by time. At the center was a circular lock shaped exactly like the old silver key inside Ava's leather satchel. Ava slowly removed the key. So this is why everyone wanted the map. Ryan nodded. Whatever is behind that door has been hidden for a very long time. Daniel carefully examined the surrounding cliffs. We should leave before more outlaws arrive. Victor laughed quietly. You are already too late. Ryan looked at him. What do you mean? Victor smiled without fear. My men never stop following us. Far across the canyon, the sound of galloping horses echoed once again. More riders were approaching. Ryan quickly turned toward Ava. Open the door now. Ava placed the old silver key into the ancient lock. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the key began glowing softly. A deep rumble echoed beneath the canyon. The stone doorway slowly opened. A cool breeze flowed out, carrying the scent of untouched earth. Beyond the entrance stretched a long underground passage lit by shafts of sunlight falling through narrow cracks above. Ryan picked up a burning lantern left near the doorway. Stay close. The four stepped inside just as the first outlaws reached the canyon. The ancient doors suddenly began closing behind them. Several riders tried to force their way through. The heavy stones slammed shut only moments before they reached it. Darkness surrounded the tunnel. Ryan raised the lantern. The passage led toward an enormous underground chamber. At its center stood a magnificent stone monument unlike anything they had ever seen. Carved into its base were 4 simple words: the journey begins here. The lantern light flickered across the ancient tunnel as Ryan led the way through the underground passage. Ava walked beside him, holding the leather satchel, while Sheriff Daniel watched the darkness behind them. Victor Graves remained tied with a rope, but his eyes never left the mysterious chamber ahead. The passage finally opened into an enormous underground hall. Ryan stopped in amazement. The ceiling stretched high above them, supported by massive stone pillars. Every wall was covered with beautiful carvings, showing old wagons, horses, rivers, mountains, and travelers crossing the western frontier. It looked less like a treasure vault and more like the forgotten history of an entire land. Ava slowly stepped toward the center of the chamber. There stood a giant stone table. Upon it rested a bronze box, untouched by time. Ryan carefully looked around. No gold, no silver, no jewels. Victor frowned with disappointment. This cannot be the lost Silver Canyon. Daniel examined the carvings on the walls. Maybe people believed the wrong story for generations. Ava gently opened the bronze box. Inside were dozens of rolled maps, carefully protected inside leather covers. Together with them rested old journals written by the first explorers who had crossed the western frontier many years before. Ryan picked up one of the journals. Every page contained detailed drawings of rivers, mountain passes, safe water sources, hidden valleys and trails that had never appeared on any official map. Daniel looked at Ryan in disbelief. These maps could save thousands of travelers. Entire towns could be built safely using this knowledge. Ava smiled softly. Samuel was telling the truth. The greatest treasure was never silver. It was knowledge. Suddenly, a loud explosion echoed through the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling. Ryan turned toward the tunnel entrance. The outlaws had used dynamite on the stone door. Another explosion followed. Large cracks spread across the ancient entrance. Victor slowly smiled. "My men are coming." Ryan closed the bronze box and handed it to Ava. "Then we leave before they get inside." As they searched for another exit, Ryan noticed fresh air blowing from behind one of the stone pillars. Hidden, there was a narrow passage leading even deeper beneath the canyon. No one knew where it ended, but it was now their only chance to escape. The underground passage grew colder with every step. As Ryan carried the lantern through the narrow tunnel, Ava followed closely, holding the bronze box while Sheriff Daniel watched behind them. Victor Graves walked in silence with his hands tied, but the confident smile never left his face. Far behind them, the sound of exploding dynamite echoed through the ancient chamber as the outlaws forced their way inside. The tunnel slowly widened until everyone heard the sound of rushing water. Ryan raised the lantern higher. An underground river flowed through a vast cavern hidden beneath the desert. Crystal clear water reflected the light across enormous stone walls, creating a beautiful glow that none of them had expected to find beneath the burning sands. A narrow wooden boat rested quietly beside the riverbank. Daniel looked surprised. Someone planned this escape long ago. Ryan untied the rope holding the boat while Ava carefully placed the bronze box inside. They climbed aboard just as distant voices echoed through the tunnel behind them. The outlaws had entered the hidden chamber. Ryan pushed the boat away from the shore. The strong current immediately carried them deeper into the underground river. For several peaceful minutes, the only sound was the flowing water. Then the river suddenly became faster. The calm water changed into powerful rapids. The small boat raced between sharp rocks as everyone struggled to stay inside. Ava grabbed the edge of the boat. Ryan pointed ahead. "Hold on." A waterfall appeared around the next bend. The boat plunged over the edge. Water exploded around them as they crashed into the river below. By some miracle, the boat remained together. Everyone was soaked but alive. When the current finally slowed, they found themselves inside another hidden cavern. Bright sunlight poured through a huge opening high above. Green trees and fresh grass surrounded the river. Daniel stared in amazement. An entire hidden valley. Ryan guided the boat toward the shore. As they stepped onto dry land, they noticed smoke rising from several chimneys in the distance. Someone was living inside the secret valley. Before they could move closer, a young woman riding a beautiful black horse appeared on the hill above them. She carried a rifle and looked directly at Ryan. "One more step, and you'll leave this valley forever." The morning sun filled the hidden valley with golden light. As Ryan slowly raised both hands, showing he meant no harm, Ava stood beside him, holding the bronze box while Daniel quietly watched the young woman on the black horse. Her rifle never moved away from Ryan, and her horse remained perfectly still upon the grassy hill. The valley looked completely different from the harsh desert they had crossed. Crystal streams flowed between green fields. Tall pine trees surrounded wooden cabins, while smoke rose peacefully from stone chimneys. Wild horses grazed freely across the meadows as if the outside world had never existed. The young woman finally spoke. "Who are you?" Ryan answered calmly. "Travelers. We entered by accident." She looked toward the bronze box in Ava's hands. "No one reaches this valley by accident." Ava stepped forward. "We are not your enemies." The young woman slowly climbed down from her horse without lowering her rifle. "My name is Clara. I protect this valley." Ryan looked around. "Are there more people here?" Clara nodded. "Enough to keep our home safe." Before anyone could continue, several riders appeared from the trees surrounding the valley. They wore simple clothes but carried rifles with confidence. Within moments, Ryan, Ava, and Daniel found themselves surrounded. One elderly man walked forward. His calm eyes rested on the bronze box. "Where did you find that?" Ava carefully placed it on the ground. "Inside an ancient chamber beneath the canyon." The old man slowly opened the box. When he saw the journals and maps, his hands began to tremble. We have waited many years for these. Ryan looked at him with surprise. You know what they are? The old man smiled. These maps belong to the founders of this valley. Without them, we could never leave this place safely. Suddenly, the peaceful moment ended. A loud gunshot echoed from the canyon entrance. Everyone turned toward the distant cliffs. Black smoke rose into the sky. Clara's face became serious. They found the valley. The outlaw gang had finally discovered the hidden entrance. The battle for the valley was about to begin. The peaceful valley changed in an instant, as alarm bells echoed between the wooden cabins. Men and women hurried to protect their homes, while children were guided toward a large cave hidden beneath the hills. Ryan watched as Clara climbed onto her black horse and rode toward the valley entrance with complete confidence. The elderly leader folded the ancient maps carefully and handed the bronze box back to Ava. These journals must never fall into the wrong hands. They are more valuable than anything in this valley. Ryan loaded his revolver. Then we protect them together. From the rocky cliffs above the valley, dozens of outlaws appeared one after another. Their horses raced down the narrow trail while Victor Graves smiled from the front of the group. He had escaped during the journey through the underground river. Ryan narrowed his eyes. I should have known he would not stay captured. Victor raised his rifle toward the valley. Bring me the maps. Burn everything else. The first gunshots echoed across the hills. Ryan and Sheriff Daniel took cover behind a stone wall, returning careful fire while Clara led several skilled riders through the trees surrounding the valley. Instead of attacking head-on, she disappeared into the forest. Minutes later, her riders appeared behind the outlaws, catching them completely by surprise. Confusion spread through the enemy lines. Ryan saw his chance. He jumped onto Blaze and charged across the open field, forcing the outlaws away from the village entrance. Victor aimed directly at Ryan. Before he could fire, Ava pushed Ryan aside. The bullet struck the saddle instead of his chest. Blaze reared high into the air but quickly regained balance. Ryan looked at Ava with relief. You saved my life, she smiled. Now we are even. The battle continued until sunset. One by one, the remaining outlaws retreated toward the canyon, leaving behind their weapons and supplies. Victor was the last to leave. Before disappearing into the mountains, he looked back at Ryan. This is not over. You have protected the valley, but you will never reach the place hidden beyond the northern mountains. Ryan frowned. Hidden beyond the mountains. Victor smiled before riding away. That is where the real journey begins. The hidden valley slowly returned to peace after the battle. The villagers repaired broken fences, treated the wounded, and gathered around the central square to thank Ryan, Ava, Clara, and Sheriff Daniel for saving their home. That evening, everyone gathered around a large campfire. The elderly village leader carefully unrolled one of the ancient maps. For years we believed these maps only belonged here, he said quietly. But we were wrong. He pointed toward a narrow trail drawn across the northern wilderness. This path leads through the northern mountains. Ryan studied the faded drawing. What is there? The old man looked into the fire. I don't know. My grandfather only told me one thing. Never let the wrong people reach the end of this trail. Ava looked at Ryan. So, our journey isn't over? Ryan smiled. I never thought it was. Early the next morning, Ryan saddled Blaze while Ava packed their supplies. Clara tightened the saddle on her black horse and rode beside them. Ryan looked at her. You don't have to come. Clara smiled. I know these mountains better than anyone. Sheriff Daniel adjusted his rifle. And someone has to make sure you two don't get into trouble. Everyone laughed. Just as they prepared to leave, the elderly leader handed Ryan a small brass compass. This belonged to the first explorer who discovered our valley. It always points toward the true trail. Ryan thanked him and placed the compass safely inside his pocket. The four riders left the hidden valley and headed north. Hours later, the green forest slowly disappeared. Tall snowy mountains rose before them, their peaks hidden inside thick clouds. A cold wind swept across the narrow trail. Suddenly, Blaze stopped walking. Ryan looked ahead. A massive wooden bridge stretched across a deep canyon. Half of it had already collapsed. At the other end of the bridge stood a lone rider dressed in a long gray coat. The stranger slowly removed his hat and smiled. "I've been waiting for you, Ryan." The icy wind whistled through the mountains as Ryan guided Blaze to a stop before the broken bridge. The wooden planks creaked over the deep canyon below, where a roaring river crashed against the rocks. The lone rider stood calmly on the opposite side. His gray coat moved gently in the wind, and his horse remained perfectly still. Ryan called out, "Who are you?" The stranger smiled. "My name isn't important. What matters is that I've been expecting you." Sheriff Daniel quietly raised his rifle. "How do you know, Ryan?" The man ignored the question. Instead, he looked directly at Ava. "You still have the bronze box." Ava's eyes widened. "How do you know about that?" The stranger sighed. "Because I've been searching for it longer than Victor Graves." Ryan stepped forward. "If you're another treasure hunter, you've come to the wrong people." The man laughed softly. "I don't want treasure. I want the truth." Without another word, he tossed a small leather notebook across the broken bridge. Ryan caught it. Inside were old sketches of the underground chamber, the hidden valley, and the ancient maps they had discovered. The last page showed something none of them had ever seen: a giant stone arch standing high above the clouds. Below the drawing were 4 words: "Gateway above the peaks." Clara stared at the sketch. "I've lived in these mountains my whole life. I've never seen this place." The stranger nodded. "Very few have." Suddenly, a loud explosion echoed through the valley. The remaining section of the old bridge cracked. Wooden beams snapped one after another. Ryan shouted, "Everyone back!" The center of the bridge collapsed into the canyon. When the dust settled, the stranger was gone. Only his horse tracks remained in the fresh snow, leading toward the highest mountain in the west. Ryan closed the notebook. "Whoever he is, he wants us to follow." Without hesitation, Ryan turned Blaze toward the narrow mountain trail. Far above them, hidden among the snowy peak, a pair of binoculars reflected the sunlight. Someone else was already watching their every move. A freezing wind swept across the mountains as Ryan, Ava, Clara, and Sheriff Daniel followed the narrow trail higher into the snowy wilderness. The air became thinner with every mile, and thick snow covered the ground where no wagon had traveled for years. The mysterious notebook remained safely inside Ryan's saddlebag. By sunset, dark clouds covered the sky. Snow began falling heavily. Clara looked ahead. "We won't make it over the pass tonight." Daniel pointed toward a faint light in the distance. "There's a cabin." The 4 riders carefully approached the small wooden cabin standing alone among tall pine trees. Ryan knocked on the door. After a few seconds, it slowly opened. An elderly woman stood quietly inside, holding an oil lantern. She smiled warmly. "I've been expecting travelers." Ryan looked surprised. "You knew we were coming?" She nodded. "The mountains always tell me." Without another question, she welcomed them inside. The cabin was warm and simple. A fire burned in the stone fireplace, while fresh bread and hot soup rested on a wooden table. For the first time in many days, everyone relaxed. As snow continued falling outside, the old woman quietly looked at Ryan. "You met the man on the broken bridge." Ryan slowly nodded. "Who is he?" She stared into the fire before answering. "He has many names, but most people call him ... The Watcher?" Ava frowned. "What does he want?" The old woman smiled gently. "He watches those who choose the difficult road. He never tells people where to go. He only tests whether they deserve to continue." Suddenly, Blaze began neighing loudly outside. Ryan rushed to the window. Fresh footprints surrounded the cabin. Not human. Much larger. Clara opened the door carefully. Snow covered the ground. At the edge of the forest stood a massive gray wolf. It wasn't attacking. It simply stared at Ryan with bright amber eyes. Then it slowly turned and walked into the dark forest. The old woman whispered quietly, It has come. Ryan looked back. What is? She answered with a calm smile. The guide. And without another sound, the great wolf disappeared into the falling snow. Morning sunlight reflected across the snow-covered mountains as Ryan opened the cabin door. The storm had passed, leaving the forest silent and untouched. Only one set of tracks crossed the fresh snow. The giant wolf's footprints. The elderly woman stood beside the doorway holding a small cloth bag. She handed it to Ryan. Food for the journey. Ryan smiled. Thank you. She looked toward the forest. If the wolf appears again, ... follow it, Ava asked. Why? The old woman answered softly. Because it never walks the wrong path. The four travelers saddled their horses and continued into the mountains. Hours passed. The trail became steeper. Snow covered the cliffs, and icy rivers crossed their path. Suddenly, Blaze stopped. Standing on a rocky ridge ahead was the same giant gray wolf. It looked directly at Ryan. Then it turned and disappeared into the trees. Ryan made his decision. We're following it. Clara hesitated. That isn't the main trail. Ryan smiled. Maybe the main trail isn't the right one. The group followed the wolf through a narrow forest where no road existed. After nearly an hour, they reached a hidden cliff overlooking a breathtaking valley. Everyone fell silent. Below them stretched a beautiful alpine meadow surrounded by waterfalls, crystal lakes, and towering snowy peaks. In the center stood a small stone church with a tall bell tower. Smoke rose from its chimney. Daniel looked through his binoculars. There are people down there. As they began riding toward the valley, Ryan noticed something unusual. The wolf had disappeared again. Only its footprints remained in the snow. Just then, the peaceful church bell rang loudly. Once, twice, 3 times. Clara's smile disappeared. That isn't a prayer bell. Daniel slowly lowered his binoculars. It's a warning. At that exact moment, armed riders emerged from behind the church, racing toward the valley entrance. Ryan tightened his grip on the reins. Someone had been waiting for them. The church bell echoed through the peaceful valley as dozens of armed riders galloped toward the entrance. Snow flew beneath their horses, while Ryan, Ava, Clara, and Sheriff Daniel stopped at the top of the ridge. Ryan quietly observed them. They don't look like outlaws. Their horses were well cared for, their rifles polished, and each rider wore the same dark green coat with a silver star stitched onto the shoulder. Clara whispered, I've never seen that symbol before. The riders surrounded the group but never pointed their weapons. Instead, their leader rode forward. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm blue eyes. He removed his hat respectfully. Welcome to Black Pine Valley. Ryan looked surprised. You know us. The man smiled. We've known you were coming for several days. Daniel frowned. How? The leader pointed toward the mountains. The watcher sent us a message. Ryan exchanged a glance with Ava. Again, the watcher. The riders escorted them into the valley. Unlike any town they had visited, Black Pine Valley was peaceful. Children played near the river. Blacksmiths worked in open workshops. Farmers harvested wheat despite the cold mountain air. Everyone smiled as the travelers passed. Ryan quietly asked, What kind of place is this? The leader answered, A place built by people who chose peace instead of gold. They stopped outside the old stone church. The village elder stepped out carrying an old leather journal. He looked directly at Ava. You've brought the bronze box. Ava nodded. We protected it all this way. The elder smiled warmly. Then you've completed the first journey. Ryan frowned. First journey. Before the elder could answer, a young messenger ran into the village. He was out of breath. Horses? Dozens of horses. They're coming through the eastern pass. Everyone turned toward the mountains. Far away, a long line of riders appeared in the snow. At the front rode Victor Graves. This time, he wasn't alone. Behind him marched nearly 100 armed men. A cold silence spread across Black Pine Valley as everyone watched the long line of riders emerging from the eastern pass. Nearly 100 armed men followed Victor Graves through the snow, their horses moving like a dark wave across the white mountains. The village elder closed the old church doors. So, he finally found us. Ryan looked toward the elder. You know Victor. The old man nodded slowly. He has searched for this valley for years, but today, he brought an army. The peaceful villagers immediately began preparing for the attack. Blacksmiths forged bullets and repaired rifles. Farmers carried supplies into stone shelters. Women and children hurried into the underground cellar beneath the church. Clara climbed the bell tower with her rifle. Sheriff Daniel organized the villagers along the wooden barricades at the valley entrance. Ryan stood beside Ava. If they break through, they'll take the bronze box. Ava held it tightly. They'll never get it. Victor Graves finally stopped his horse a short distance from the valley. He rode forward alone. Ryan, you fought well, but this ends today. Ryan stepped beyond the barricade. What do you want? Victor smiled. The bronze box. And the journal inside the church? The elder quietly whispered. He knows. Ryan looked back. What journal? The elder sighed. The final journal. The one that completes the maps. Ryan turned toward Victor. You already have enough men. Why chase old papers? Victor's expression became serious. They don't lead to treasure. They lead to something powerful enough to change the entire frontier. Before Ryan could answer, a loud whistle echoed from the cliffs. Victor raised his hand. Attack! Dozens of riders charged toward the valley. Gunfire exploded across the snowy fields. Ryan and Daniel fired from behind the barricades, while Clara picked off enemy riders from the church tower. The peaceful valley became a battlefield. Then, a deafening crack echoed through the mountains. Everyone looked up. A massive wall of snow broke free from the highest peak. An enormous avalanche rushed toward both armies. No one had time to escape. The mountain roared like thunder. A massive wall of snow crashed down the slope, swallowing trees, rocks, and everything in its path. Run! Ryan shouted. Panic spread across the battlefield. Victor Graves' riders abandoned the attack and tried to escape. But the avalanche was moving too fast. Ryan spurred Blaze toward the church. Ava, Daniel, Clara. The four of them raced through the valley as frightened villagers rushed toward the underground shelters. The village elder pointed toward a large stone tunnel beneath the church. Everyone inside. Within moments, hundreds of people disappeared into the shelter. Ryan turned back. Several children were still trapped near the river. Without thinking, he galloped straight toward them. Stay together, he shouted, one by one. He lifted the frightened children onto Blaze while Ava helped the youngest climb onto another horse. Daniel and Clara covered them as snow and ice thundered closer. The ground shook violently. Seconds later, the avalanche crashed through Black Pine Valley. Snow buried houses, fences, and empty streets. The force threw Ryan from Blaze. Everything disappeared beneath a cloud of white. Hours later, Ryan slowly opened his eyes. The storm had ended. The valley was almost completely buried beneath deep snow. He struggled to his feet. Ava? No answer. Daniel? Silent. Clara? Only the cold mountain wind replied. Ryan's heart raced. Then he heard a familiar neigh. Blaze. The loyal horse was alive. Ryan quickly followed the sound. Behind a broken pine tree stood Blaze. Beside a narrow crack in the snow, warm air was rising from below. Ryan brushed away the ice. Hidden beneath the avalanche was an ancient stone staircase, leading deep underground. At the top step lay Ava's leather scarf. She had been there. Ryan gripped the scarf tightly. They're alive, And whatever is beneath this mountain, they've been taken there. Ryan tied Blaze near the entrance and picked up an old lantern that had survived the avalanche. Holding Ava's scarf tightly, He stepped onto the ancient stone staircase hidden beneath the snow. The deeper he descended, the warmer the air became. After several minutes, the staircase opened into a breathtaking underground world. A vast cavern stretched beyond the light of his lantern. Crystal streams flowed between enormous rock pillars. Ancient wooden walkways crossed deep ravines. Natural sunlight poured through cracks high in the mountain, making the entire cavern glow. Ryan whispered, "This place has been here all along." Fresh footprints covered the dusty ground. Not one person, many. Ryan followed them. Soon he heard voices. He hid behind a giant stone pillar. Victor Graves stood inside the cavern with several of his men. Across from them stood Ava, Clara, Sheriff Daniel, and the village elder. Their hands were tied, but they were unharmed. Victor smiled. "I knew the avalanche would reveal the hidden entrance." The elder looked at him. "You've already found the mountain. What more do you want?" Victor pointed toward a pair of enormous stone doors standing at the far end of the cavern. "They're hiding something. The final secret." Ryan quietly moved through the shadows, searching for a way to free his friends. As he reached the back of the cavern, he noticed an old iron leva hidden behind a broken statue. Without making a sound, he pulled it. A loud grinding noise echoed through the cavern. The enormous stone doors slowly began to open. Everyone turned toward them. A powerful gust of cold air rushed out. Inside, there was no treasure, no gold, no silver. Instead, a perfectly preserved old steam locomotive rested on ancient railway tracks. Behind it stretched a railway tunnel disappearing into complete darkness. Sheriff Daniel stared in disbelief. A railroad ... inside a mountain. The village elder whispered, "No one has seen it for over 50 years. Then, the locomotive's headlamp suddenly flickered to life by itself. A long whistle echoed through the tunnel. Something ... was coming toward them from the darkness. The lonely whistle echoed through the underground railway tunnel. Everyone stood frozen. The old steam locomotive had been silent for decades, yet its headlamp now glowed brightly, filling the cavern with warm yellow light. Ryan quietly slipped behind a stone pillar, watching Victor Graves and his men. Even Victor looked confused. "I never touched it ... The rails began to vibrate. A deep rumbling sound grew louder. Then, another steam locomotive slowly emerged from the darkness. It wasn't abandoned, it was moving. Its polished black engine released clouds of white steam. As it rolled to a gentle stop beside the ancient platform, the cabin door opened. An elderly engineer stepped down wearing a faded railway uniform. His silver beard reached his chest, and a brass pocket watch hung from his coat. He calmly looked around the cavern. His eyes stopped on Ryan. "I knew you would find this place." Ryan stepped out from hiding. "You know me." The old engineer smiled. "I've been waiting for the person who protected the maps instead of selling them." Victor angrily raised his revolver. "Enough. Tell me what's hidden here." The engineer didn't even look at him. Instead, he placed a large iron key into the side of the locomotive. A loud mechanical click echoed through the cavern. The ancient stone wall behind the platform slowly slid open. Bright daylight poured inside. Beyond the opening stretched a breathtaking mountain railway, unlike anything they had ever imagined. The tracks crossed giant bridges, passed through waterfalls, and disappeared between towering snowy peaks. Ryan stared in amazement. "Where does it go?" The engineer answered quietly. "To the last station." Before anyone could ask another question, Victor fired his revolver. The bullet struck the engineer's shoulder. The old man fell to one knee. Ryan immediately ran toward him. Victor shouted to his men, "Take the train." The outlaws rushed forward. At that exact moment, the locomotive released a deafening whistle. Its massive wheels slowly began turning. The train was leaving. With Ava still trapped inside one of its carriages. The giant steam locomotive slowly gathered speed as thick clouds of white steam filled the underground cavern. Ryan saw Ava through the window of the first passenger carriage, desperately trying to force the locked door open. "Ryan!" she shouted. Without thinking, Ryan sprinted after the moving train. The ancient railway curved toward the mountain opening while Victor Graves and his men raced for the last carriage. Sheriff Daniel fired several shots, forcing two outlaws off the tracks. Clara jumped onto her black horse and chased the train along a narrow path beside the railway. Ryan pushed himself harder, just as the last carriage passed him. He grabbed the iron handrail and pulled himself aboard. Victor leaped toward the same carriage. Ryan turned and kicked him squarely in the chest. Victor lost his grip and crashed onto the gravel beside the tracks as the train disappeared into the mountains. Inside the train, Ryan finally reached Ava. He broke the lock with the butt of his revolver and opened the door. Ava smiled with relief. "I knew you'd come." Ryan laughed. "I wasn't about to let you take this ride alone." The old engineer, though wounded, slowly entered the carriage. He looked out the window toward the breathtaking mountain railway. "We're almost there." "Almost where?" Ryan asked. The engineer pointed ahead. Far above a deep valley stood a magnificent old railway station built entirely from stone and timber. Wildflowers covered the surrounding hills, and dozens of vintage steam locomotives rested peacefully on the tracks. A weathered wooden sign stood beside the platform. "Last station." The train slowly came to a stop. The engineer stepped onto the platform and smiled. "For more than 50 years, this place has waited for someone honest enough to find it." Ryan, Ava, Clara, and Sheriff Daniel looked around in silence. It wasn't a treasure. It wasn't a kingdom. It was a forgotten railway town, perfectly preserved, untouched by time, a place that could reconnect isolated mountain communities across the frontier. Ryan looked at Ava. "So, this was the real destination." She nodded with a smile. The greatest discoveries aren't always made of gold. Behind them, the sun rose over the snowy mountains, filling the valley with warm golden light. Their long journey had finally reached its end. The end.